The hotel bar buzzed with conversation, but my daughter-in-law Lauren's voice cut through everything else like a knife through butter. She was holding court at our corner table, gesturing dramatically as she told her latest story about some real estate deal she'd closed, completely talking over me like I wasn't even sitting there. And then I told the seller, "Listen, honey, this market doesn't wait for anyone," Lauren announced to her circle of friends, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against her wine glass. "You either take my offer or watch your property value tank." I tried to interject with a comment about the neighborhood's history. I'd worked as a hotel engineer for 30 years and knew every building in this district. But Lauren just raised her voice louder. "Frank, could you grab us some more napkins from the bar?" she said without even glancing my way. "The cocktail ones, not the regular ones." "Thanks, sweetie." Her friends giggled as I stood up, feeling every one of my 62 years. This wasn't the first time Lauren had treated me like hired help, but something about tonight felt different. Worse. I walked to the bar where Ravi, the young bartender I'd chatted with before, was wiping down glasses. He was a nice kid, working his way through law school part-time. As I reached for the napkins, he quietly slid my pack of cigarettes across the mahogany surface. "I didn't give you these," and I said, confused. Ravi glanced around nervously, then leaned closer. "Check inside," he whispered. I opened the pack and found a small piece of paper tucked between the cigarettes. In neat handwriting, it read, "Leave through the service door. Now." My heart started pounding. What's this about? But Ravi had already moved to the other end of the bar, serving another customer. I looked back at our table where Lauren was now making exaggerated gestures, clearly telling another story at someone's expense. Her friend Serena was glancing toward the bar, then quickly looking away when she noticed me watching. Something cold settled in my stomach. I pocketed the cigarettes and headed toward the back of the restaurant, past the restrooms toward the service corridor I knew from my engineering days. The hallway was dimly lit and smelled of cleaning supplies and kitchen grease. As I pushed through the heavy door, I heard Lauren's voice carry from the dining room. "Honestly, sometimes I think Frank's losing it. Miles and I are going to have to make some decisions soon about his living situation." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood frozen in the service corridor, listening to the woman my son had married discuss my future like I was some kind of burden to be managed. "The apartment building association is meeting next week," Lauren continued. "I've been talking to some of the board members about safety concerns with elderly residents. It's really for his own good." I heard her friends murmur sympathetic agreement, and my hands started shaking. Through the small window in the service door, I could see Serena on her phone, typing rapidly while glancing toward the back of the restaurant. I pushed through the exit into the cool night air, my mind racing. What had Lauren been planning? And how had Ravi known to warn me? The walk home to my modest apartment took 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. Every step, I replayed Lauren's words. Safety concerns? Living situation decisions? I'd been living independently in the same rent-controlled apartment for 8 years. Ever since my wife Margaret passed away, there was nothing unsafe about my situation except maybe trusting my family. Back in my apartment, I sat in Margaret's old recliner and stared at the family photos on the side table. There was Miles as a baby, then as a teenager, then his wedding day with Lauren 5 years ago. When had everything changed? When had I become someone to be managed instead of respected? My phone buzzed with a group text notification. Lauren had posted a photo from tonight with the caption, "Amazing dinner with the family. So grateful for everyone who supports our dreams." I looked at the photo. She'd cropped me out completely. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from an unknown number. "Be careful. You weren't meant to see tonight. RR. Ravi." Somehow that young bartender had known what was coming and tried to protect me. But protect me from what exactly? I walked to my kitchen calendar and flipped to next week. There, in Lauren's distinctive handwriting, was a note I didn't remember seeing before. HOA board vote. 7 p.m. Tuesday. My blood ran cold. Lauren had access to my apartment. Miles had given her a spare key months ago. For emergencies. She'd been here, marking my calendar, planning something I wasn't supposed to know about. I picked up my phone and dialed Carmen Ruiz, an old friend who worked in hotel HR. If anyone would know about property law and tenant rights, it would be Carmen. Frank? It's late, honey. Everything okay? Carmen, I need to ask you something about building associations and tenant rights. Hypothetically, if someone wanted to remove a primary occupant from their apartment, what would they need to do? There was a long pause. Frank, why are you asking me this? Is someone trying to mess with your housing? Maybe. I'm not sure yet. Well, hypothetically, they'd need documentation of safety violations, signatures from family members with power of attorney and board approval. But Frank, if someone's trying to pull something like that, you need to be very careful. These things can move fast once they get started. After I hung up, I sat in the dark living room for a long time thinking. Lauren wasn't just making casual conversation about my future. She was actively working to take control of my life, and she'd been planning it carefully enough to involve building associations and legal procedures. But she'd made one mistake. She'd gotten overconfident and talked about it publicly, not knowing I could overhear. And somehow, a part-time law student bartender had picked up on her scheme and tried to warn me. I looked at the family photos again, but this time, I wasn't feeling nostalgic. I was getting angry. I'd spent 30 years maintaining buildings, solving problems, and taking care of details that other people overlooked. If Lauren wanted to play games with my housing and my dignity, she was about to discover that underestimating Frank DeVere was a serious mistake. I pulled out a notebook and started writing down everything I could remember from tonight. The conversation I'd overheard, Serena's suspicious phone behavior, the calendar entry I didn't remember making. If Lauren was building a case against me, then I'd build a better case in my defense. But first, I needed to understand exactly what she was planning. The next morning, I drove to Miles and Lauren's townhouse in the suburbs. They'd asked me to bring groceries and fix a running toilet, typical weekend errands that had become routine over the past year. What I hadn't realized until last night was how these favors might be part of a larger pattern. Lauren answered the door in full makeup and a designer workout outfit, despite it being 9 in the morning. Frank, perfect timing. I'm about to do a live video about weekend productivity, and having you fix things in the background will be so authentic. She didn't ask if I minded being in her video. She just assumed I'd comply. I carried the groceries to their kitchen while Lauren set up her ring light and phone tripod. The house was immaculate in that sterile way that looked good on social media, but didn't feel lived in. Everything was white and gray, with motivational quotes in cursive font hanging on the walls. Miles is at his golf lesson, Lauren said, adjusting her camera angle. But he left a list of things that need fixing. The toilet, obviously, but also the garbage disposal is making a weird noise, and there's a loose floorboard in the hallway. I nodded and headed toward the bathroom, but Lauren called after me. Oh, and Frank, try to stay out of the main living areas while I'm filming, okay? I'm building my brand around aspirational lifestyle content, and she trailed off with an apologetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. The message was clear. I didn't fit her aesthetic. I spent the next hour fixing the toilet, while Lauren filmed herself making a smoothie and talking about optimizing your Sunday routine. Through the thin walls, I could hear her explaining to her followers how successful people delegate household tasks to focus on high-value activities. When I emerged from the bathroom, I found my 10-year-old grandson Lucas sitting at the kitchen counter, looking miserable. Hey, buddy, I said, ruffling his hair. How's your weekend going? Lucas shrugged. Mom says I can't play in the living room because she's working. And Dad's always at golf now. I noticed Lauren glance over from her filming setup, a slight frown crossing her face. She didn't like it when Lucas complained, even mildly. Want to help me fix the garbage disposal? I asked Lucas. His face lit up. Can I hold the flashlight? Absolutely. We spent 20 minutes working under the sink together. Lucas was a smart kid asking good questions about how the disposal worked and why it was making noise. It reminded me of working with Miles at that age, back when my son actually seemed to enjoy spending time with me. Grandpa, Lucas said quietly, while Lauren was in the other room. Why do you always stand in the kitchen looking worried when you come over? The question caught me off guard. Do I do that? Yeah. And you always look sad when mom gives you lists of things to do. Kids notice everything. I'd thought I was hiding my feelings better than that. Sometimes adults have complicated relationships, buddy. But that doesn't have anything to do with how much I love spending time with you. Lauren returned to the kitchen just as I was finishing with the disposal. She had a piece of paper in her hand and a pen. Frank, before you go, could you sign this for me? It's just an insurance thing for the building association. Something about emergency contacts and medical information. She set the paper down in front of me and immediately started chattering about her video engagement numbers, clearly trying to distract me from reading the document carefully. The algorithm has been so weird lately, she said, leaning against the counter. But I think if I post more family content, it might help with reach. Speaking of which, we should plan Lucas's birthday party soon. I'm thinking something really Instagram-worthy this year. I tried to focus on the paper, but the legal language was dense and Lauren kept talking. Something about temporary occupancy status and family decision-making authority. It looked official, with letterhead from the building association. What exactly is this for? I asked. Oh, just standard stuff. You know how these building associations are with their paperwork. Miles already signed his copy. She pointed to a signature line that did look like Miles's handwriting. My son had always signed things without reading them carefully, a habit that had gotten him in trouble before. Something in my gut told me not to sign. But Lauren was standing right there waiting, and Lucas was watching, and I didn't want to make a scene. I scribbled my signature quickly and handed the paper back. Perfect, Lauren said, folding it immediately and tucking it into her purse. You're such a lifesaver, Frank. But as I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a serious mistake. That evening, I ran into Mrs. Patterson, Lucas's third-grade teacher, in the school parking lot. I'd been picking up some papers from the after-school program office. Mr. DeVere, she said, I'm glad I ran into you. I've been meaning to ask, is everything okay at home? Lucas has seemed a bit anxious lately. He mentioned something about changes in the family. My stomach dropped. What kind of changes? He said something about you having to move away soon. I didn't want to pry, but he seemed upset about it. I assured Mrs. Patterson that there were no immediate plans for me to move anywhere, but her words haunted me all the way home. What had Lauren been telling Lucas? And why was my grandson hearing about my living situation before I was? That night, I returned to the hotel bar. I needed to talk to Ravi and find out what he'd observed last night. The young bartender looked relieved to see me. I wasn't sure you'd get the message, he said quietly, wiping down the bar around my beer. What did you see? Ravi glanced around to make sure no one was listening. Your daughter-in-law was here earlier this week, talking to my manager about security issues with some of the older guests. She mentioned you specifically, said there had been some incidents. What kind of incidents? That's just it. I've never seen you cause any problems. You're one of the most polite customers we have. But she was very convincing, had some official-looking papers with her. My hands tightened around my beer glass. What did she tell them? Something about confusion and aggressive behavior. She said the family was concerned and that the hotel might need to be aware for liability reasons. Lauren was building a narrative about me, creating a paper trail that painted me as unstable or dangerous. The insurance document I'd signed that afternoon suddenly took on a more sinister meaning. There's something else, Ravi said. I overheard her on the phone while she was waiting for your manager. She was talking about signatures and votes, and she said something like, the old man won't know what hit him. I felt sick. This wasn't just about my apartment or my dignity. Lauren was orchestrating something much bigger, and I'd been walking right into her trap. Why did you warn me? I asked. Ravi shrugged. My grandmother went through something similar with my uncle's wife. Family members who see elderly relatives as obstacles instead of people. It never ends well unless someone fights back. As I walked home that night, I thought about Lucas's worried face and Mrs. Patterson's concern. Lauren wasn't just attacking me. She was creating a situation that would hurt my grandson, too. Lucas was already anxious about family changes he didn't understand. But Lauren had made one crucial error. She'd assumed I was just a helpless old man who would go quietly. She didn't know about my 30 years of experience dealing with building codes, tenant rights, and property management. She definitely didn't know about my friendship with Carmen, who understood HR policies and legal procedures better than almost anyone. Most importantly, she didn't realize that her own overconfidence was creating witnesses and evidence that could be used against her. I pulled out my phone and texted Carmen. "Can we meet tomorrow? I think I'm going to need your help with something important." Then I sat down at my kitchen table and started making a list of everything I knew, everyone who had witnessed Lauren's behavior, and every document I could remember signing over the past few months. If Lauren wanted to play legal games with my life, she was about to discover that I'd been managing complex building systems and regulations since before she was born. And unlike her, I actually read documents before I signed them. Well, except for today. But that mistake was about to become her problem, not mine. Monday morning, I walked into the building association office with a simple question. What was this special vote I'd heard about? The receptionist, a tired-looking woman in her 40s, barely glanced up from her computer. "Are you a resident or a family member?" "Resident. Frank DeVere, apartment 4B. She typed something and frowned. "There's a note here that you might need assistance with paperwork due to..." "Medical concerns?" My jaw tightened. I don't have any medical concerns that affect my ability to handle paperwork. The receptionist looked uncomfortable. "Well, there's a special session scheduled for tomorrow night regarding occupancy status for your unit. The notice was sent to your emergency contact since..." "Since what?" "Since the family member who filed the paperwork indicated you might not be able to handle official correspondence reliably." I kept my voice steady, but inside I was furious. "I'd like to speak with Greta Malm, please." Greta emerged from her office 5 minutes later, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. She was a precise woman in her 50s, who ran the building association with military efficiency. "Mr. DeVere," she said carefully, "I understand you have questions about tomorrow's proceedings. I have questions about why there are proceedings at all. I pay my rent on time, I don't disturb other residents, and I maintain my apartment properly." Greta gestured toward her office. Once we were seated, she pulled out a thick folder. "Your daughter-in-law filed a comprehensive request for occupancy review," she said. "She provided documentation of safety concerns, family medical power of attorney, and several witness statements about incidents in the building." "What incidents?" "Confusion about apartment numbers, leaving doors unlocked, aggressive interactions with neighbors." Greta read from the file without making eye contact. She also provided documentation from local businesses about concerning behavior. "The hotel?" Lauren had turned Ravi's manager against me with fabricated stories. "Mrs. Mom, I'd like to see these witness statements." "I'm not sure that's appropriate, given the medical concerns outlined in the family's request." "What medical concerns? I haven't been diagnosed with anything." Greta looked genuinely confused. "The power of attorney documentation indicates early-stage dementia and family concerns about decision-making capacity." I felt like I'd been punched. "I don't have dementia. I've never been diagnosed with dementia. And I never signed a power of attorney." "But..." Greta flipped through the papers. "Your signature is right here." She showed me a document that looked official, complete with notary stamps and legal language. And there at the bottom was what looked like my signature. But I'd never seen this document before in my life. "Mrs. Mom, I need to make a formal request to review all documentation related to this case. As the primary occupant, I have that right, regardless of what my daughter-in-law has told you." Greta nodded slowly. "You can review the file, but the vote is scheduled for tomorrow night. If you want to contest the family's request, you'll need to present counter evidence." I left the building association office with copies of Lauren's filing and a sick feeling in my stomach. She'd been planning this for months, creating a paper trail that painted me as mentally incompetent and potentially dangerous. But she'd also made mistakes. I drove straight to Carmen's office at the downtown hotel where she worked as HR director. Carmen took one look at my face and cleared her schedule. "What's going on, Frank?" I spread the documents across her desk and explained everything. The bar conversation, the mysterious signature I'd provided yesterday, the building association meeting, the fabricated medical concerns. Carmen studied the papers with the methodical attention she brought to all HR investigations. After 20 minutes, she leaned back in her chair. Frank, this power of attorney document is a forgery. How can you tell? Several things. First, the notary stamp is from a different county than where you live. Second, the witness signatures are in the same handwriting. Look at the letter formations. Third, and most importantly, there's no medical documentation to support a dementia diagnosis because you don't have dementia. She pulled out her laptop and started typing. I'm going to check something else. You said Lauren mentioned filing complaints about you at the hotel? That's what Ravi told me. Carmen made several phone calls, using her professional network to verify information. After an hour, she had a clear picture. Lauren filed complaints at 3 local businesses over the past 2 months, Carmen said. The hotel, the grocery store where you shop, and the pharmacy, all claiming erratic behavior and family concerns about your mental state. But I haven't had any problems at those places. I know. I called and spoke to managers. The hotel complaint was filed after an alleged incident that supposedly happened on a Tuesday afternoon 3 weeks ago. But Frank, weren't you volunteering at the library that Tuesday? You mentioned it when we talked. I checked my calendar. She was right. I'd been helping with their computer literacy program that entire afternoon. Carmen, Lauren is systematically creating false evidence to have me declared incompetent. It looks that way. But Frank, she's also created a paper trail that can be traced and disproven. The question is, do you want to fight this? I thought about Lucas's worried face, about being treated like hired help in my son's house, about Lauren cropping me out of family photos. I thought about Ravi risking his job to warn me, and about Mrs. Patterson's concern for my grandson. Yes, I said, I want to fight this, but I need help. Carmen smiled grimly. You've got it. But we need to work fast. The vote is tomorrow night, and we need evidence, not just accusations. We spent the rest of the afternoon developing a plan. Carmen would use her HR contacts to get official statements from the businesses where Lauren had filed false complaints. I would gather documentation of my actual activities and medical records to disprove the dementia claims. Most importantly, we would try to find out how Lauren had obtained what appeared to be my signature on legal documents I'd never signed. That evening, I went to the public library and used their computers to research tenant rights and occupancy law. What I found was encouraging. Building associations couldn't remove primary occupants based solely on family requests, especially when those requests were based on medical claims that couldn't be substantiated. But I also learned that if Lauren's documentation appeared legitimate, the burden of proof would be on me to disprove her claims. And I had less than 24 hours to build a case. As I walked home from the library, my phone buzzed with a text from Miles. Dad, Lauren told me about the building association meeting tomorrow. She says it's just a formality to update your lease terms. You don't need to worry about it. My son was either completely clueless about what his wife was doing, or he was actively helping her. Either way, I couldn't count on support from that direction. But I wasn't the helpless old man Lauren thought I was. I had allies now, and I had evidence that her entire case was built on lies and forgeries. Tomorrow night, she was going to find out what happened when you underestimated someone who'd spent 3 decades solving problems that other people couldn't handle. I just hoped it would be enough. Tuesday morning, I met Carmen at a coffee shop near the courthouse. She had a manila folder thick with documents and a grim expression. I've got good news and bad news, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. The good news is that I was able to get official statements from all 3 businesses where Lauren filed complaints. None of them can substantiate her claims, and 2 managers remember her being pushy and demanding when they couldn't provide the kind of documentation she wanted. And the bad news? The bad news is that she's accelerated the timeline. The building association meeting is tonight, not tomorrow. Greta called me this morning. Apparently, Lauren filed an emergency motion, claiming you'd become increasingly agitated and potentially dangerous. I felt my blood pressure spike. Based on what? Based on your visit to the association office yesterday. She's claiming that your aggressive questioning of Greta proves the family's concerns about your mental state. Carmen opened the folder and spread out documents. But here's what we've got to work with. First, your medical records from Dr. Martinez. He was happy to provide a letter stating that you've never been diagnosed with dementia or any cognitive impairment. She handed me an official letter on medical letterhead. Dr. Martinez had been my physician for 8 years, and his statement was clear and unambiguous. Second, I got the security footage from the hotel. Carmen pulled out her laptop and opened a video file. This is from 3 weeks ago, the Tuesday when Lauren claimed you had an incident at the bar. The timestamp showed 2:47 p.m. on the date in question. The footage clearly showed the hotel bar, but I was nowhere in it, because I'd been at the library, just as Carmen had suspected. But here's the interesting part, Carmen said, fast-forwarding the video. Look who shows up at 3:15. Lauren appeared on screen, dressed casually and carrying a large purse. She sat at the bar, ordered a drink, and then appeared to be having an animated conversation with someone off camera. After about 10 minutes, she pulled out her phone and made a call. I talked to Ravi, Carmen said. He wasn't working that day, but the day manager remembers Lauren asking detailed questions about security procedures and incident reporting. She wanted to know exactly what kind of documentation would be required if there were problems with a customer. She was researching how to file a false complaint. That's what it looks like. And Frank, there's more. Carmen pulled out another set of documents. I asked Greta to let me review the original power of attorney paperwork. The document is definitely forged, but it's a sophisticated forgery. Someone with access to legal templates and notary stamps created this. Lauren's a real estate agent. She'd have access to that kind of thing. Exactly, but she made one crucial mistake. Carmen pointed to a section of the forged document. The witness signatures are supposed to be from people who observed you signing the power of attorney. But look at the names. I read the witness information. Sarah Mitchell and Jennifer Walsh. Those are Lauren's two closest friends, I said. They were at the bar that night when I overheard her talking about the building association. Right, and when I called them this morning, pretending to be verifying information for the association, Jennifer Walsh let slip that she'd never actually seen you sign anything. She thought she was just helping Lauren with paperwork for Frank's apartment situation. The pieces were falling into place. Lauren had convinced her friends to sign as witnesses to a document signing that had never happened, probably telling them it was just a formality. There's one more thing, Carmen said. I think I know how she got your signature. She pulled out the insurance document I'd signed at Lauren's house on Sunday. I had a friend in legal look at this. It's not actually an insurance document. It's a practice sheet, the kind of thing people use to trace signatures for forgery. Look at the fine print at the bottom. I squinted at the tiny text I'd ignored when Lauren was distracting me with chatter about social media algorithms. Authorization for signature sample collection for estate planning purposes. She tricked you into providing a signature sample that she could use to forge other documents. I felt stupid and angry in equal measure. Lauren had played me perfectly, using my grandson's presence and her own nervous chatter to distract me from reading what I was signing. But she'd also created evidence of her own deception. Carmen, do we have enough to stop this? She checked her watch. The meeting is in 6 hours. We have enough to raise serious questions about Lauren's claims, but we need to present it properly. Are you ready to face down your daughter-in-law and your son in front of a room full of strangers? I thought about it. 6 months ago, the answer would have been no. I'd been so focused on trying to maintain peace in the family that I'd let Lauren walk all over me. I'd accepted being treated like hired help, being excluded from family photos, being talked over and dismissed. But that was before I understood what she was really planning. I'm ready, I said. We spent the rest of the afternoon preparing my presentation for the Building Association Board. Carmen helped me organize the evidence logically. Medical documentation first, then the business statements, then the security footage, and finally, the proof of document forgery. At 4 p.m., my phone rang. It was Miles. Dad, Lauren says you've been harassing the Building Association and making threats. She's really worried about you. Miles, have you actually read the documents your wife filed with the association? Well, no, but Lauren explained everything. She says you've been having memory problems and getting confused about things. She showed me the power of attorney you signed. Son, I never signed a power of attorney, and I don't have memory problems. There was a long pause. Dad, why would Lauren lie about something like that? That's a very good question. Why don't you come to the association meeting tonight and find out? I I don't think that's a good idea. Lauren says it might be upsetting for you. After I hung up, I realized that Miles was either completely under Lauren's influence or he was actively choosing to believe her lies because they were more convenient than facing the truth about his wife. Either way, I was on my own. At 6 p.m., I walked into the building association meeting room, carrying a folder of evidence and 30 years of experience dealing with people who thought they could manipulate systems and procedures. Lauren was already there, sitting in the front row with her friends Sarah and Jennifer. She looked confident and polished, dressed like she was going to a business meeting. When she saw me, she gave me a sad, sympathetic smile. Frank, she said loudly enough for others to hear, I'm so glad you decided to come. I know this is all very confusing for you. The condescending tone made my jaw clench, but I kept my voice steady. I'm not confused, Lauren, but I think some other people might be. Greta called the meeting to order and explained the situation to the board members and the handful of residents who had shown up. According to her summary, the family had requested an occupancy review due to safety concerns and medical issues that affected my ability to live independently. Mrs. Lauren DeVere will present the family's concerns first, Greta announced. Lauren stood up and delivered a polished presentation about her worries for my safety and the safety of other residents. She spoke about incidents of confusion, aggressive behavior, and the family's difficult decision to seek help through official channels. She was convincing. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed her myself. The family has tried to handle this privately, Lauren concluded, but we've reached the point where professional intervention is necessary. We're requesting that the association work with us to transition Frank to a more appropriate living situation where he can get the care he needs. Several board members nodded sympathetically. Lauren's friends murmured agreement from the front row. Then Greta called my name. I stood up slowly, opened my folder, and looked around the room at the faces watching me. Some looked sympathetic, some looked skeptical, and some just looked uncomfortable. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, everything you just heard is a lie.